So David, I think it's amazing we've got a guy from Louisiana and a guy from Mississippi on the stage in San Francisco, but we're representing the South.
Our family trees look like stumps down there, don't they?
Yes, they do. We're probably related in some way, I would guess. All right, so we've got some good questions for you tonight, David. So first, I would like to start, let's take that big leap from Shreveport, Louisiana to traveling around the world. Did you see yourself as a future leader or CEO of a major public company?
I really didn't. I saw myself as a professional baseball player until I was about 6, and that went away quickly. I really didn't. After I graduated from SMU, I went out like everyone else. You go out and you find a job, and you're still kind of sorting out what you want to do. I was fortunate to work for two great leaders. The first one, I was actually at EDS and worked for Ross Perot when that was still a somewhat small company, and got to kind of see what he was made of. And then when I got to American Airlines, Bob Crandall was there, who's legendary in the airline industry. And when you start to see those guys and see how they operate and see how they do things, you take a step back and think, wow, that looks like a lot of fun. I wonder if I could do that. And I would say that's really the first time I got it into my head that I would like to run a company.
Well, and the airline industry, I mean, that's, the exchange industry is tough, but the airline industry has definitely had this challenge over the years. What made you stick with the airline industry for all these years, and what do you love about the airline industry?
Well, it started out, of course, with the ability to travel free, and that was quite alluring. I'd been with EDS for a couple of years, and I had friends, because I went to school in Dallas, I had friends at American who rang me up and basically said, you need to get over here. Some friends that had gone to SMU with me, that it's a great company, it's an exciting time, it was right after deregulation. And so I went over, and the travel was great, running all over the world, getting to do a lot of things that that perhaps otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. But I think what kept me there and what really hooked me was just the intellectual stimulation of the industry. That it's a very complex industry. That you guys see a lot of it, of course, as passengers. You see how we market it, how we sell it. You see the customer side of it in the airport terminal. But that's really scratching the surface. That probably 80% of our time is really spent on the guts of running an airline, of making sure airplanes are repaired, making sure airplanes are in the right place, making sure crew are in the right place, and how you deal with weather and air traffic control and everything else. And it's just a tremendous logistical challenge that, once it sucks you in, is very difficult to let go.
That's great. We've obviously done well at it. So what's the hardest decision you've ever had to make as a leader?
I think that actually came while I was at Virgin America. I've had to do some other very difficult things as a leader, but I think the toughest decision we had to make was really back in 2012, and we were struggling at that point. The entire industry was struggling. Half the industry was in bankruptcy. We were trying to grow our airline and really just trying to get the thing off the air. That even at that point in 2012, we were the only airline since JetBlue was founded in 2000 that was actually still in business. That every other airline had gone out of business, and we came to a realization, or actually I came to a realization in a moment of clarity, that we had to go in and cancel all of our aircraft that we had on order. So we had about another 40 airplanes coming in. It represented growth for the company. It represented career opportunities for everyone that was working with us. But I just came to this conclusion that if we headed down this path and things didn't go exactly right, that it was going to all end very badly. And as much as I hated disappointing the people who were counting on growth for career advancement, I also understood that my key responsibility to them was job security. So it was a tough decision. We negotiated with banks, with lessors, and with everyone else, and basically, in some ways it was a restructuring, but without the aid of bankruptcy. But then, of course, you've got to deliver the news to people that, hey, this awesome plan that we had before of taking all these airplanes and doing all these great things has now been put on hold for a couple of years. But ultimately, it saved the airline and it put us in the position that we are in now.
Yeah, that sounds like a tough period to go through, but you guys obviously came out on the other side of that, so congratulations on that. I like this kind of question because I think it does kind of make you look back to when we were both younger. And so if you could write a letter to your younger self, what are the 3 things you'd say?
All right. don't be such a jerk when you're a kid. That may be one of them.
I can't imagine you as a jerk, David. Come on.
You know, I think there are a couple of things that that I would say. One is that you will get better at this, and what I mean by that is, and I'm going to sound like a really old person right now, so please indulge me. Is that experience matters? That if you are a smart person, that you learn every year that you're working, and if you have that mind and that inquisitive mind and that intellectual curiosity, that you are always learning. So I think when you're young, and certainly I was guilty of it, you're dismissive of experience. And I think once you get a little bit older, you realize, wow, I am much better at what I do now than I was 20 years ago, very simply because of all of the things that I've learned along the way. So that would probably be the first thing I would say, is that you will get better at this. And by the way, the old people you're looking at are better at it than you think they are. I think the second thing, you know, I've been fortunate to work all over the world with, primarily with American, but with other companies also. And probably my one regret about that is you get overseas and you're so busy and you're head down and you were sent there for a very specific purpose. It's expensive to have Americans overseas. And so you were there and you do the job. And I think the thing I regret about that is not spending a little bit more time exploring the places I was, you know, whether it was in Argentina, you know, or Japan or Great Britain, that, you know, you get a little bit too focused in the work sometimes when you're climbing the ladder. So, and I think those are the key things.
Those are the key things. Okay, good. So, along those same lines, what do you think you've learned being a leader that you would have wanted to know earlier? What do you wish you knew before you kind of went on this path?
I think probably the toughest thing, the toughest lessons I had was when, okay, I don't quite know how to put this, but when you take things at perhaps what is said and what's at face value, rather than taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. And I was in a job in a foreign country and was charged with really going in and turning around this company I was working for, and I won't get into names because I'm actually still in litigation. But anyway, what I was tasked to do made a lot of sense for me as a young man and as an American. That it was basically go in and do these things to get this company turned around and get it profitable again, because it's burning up too much of the state's money. What I should have realized was that was the thing that was being said, but it wasn't necessarily the thing they wanted because of all the pain that came along with it. And I think if I had seen that situation now, I think I could have pulled the lens back a little bit and said, okay, this is this piece in this context, rather than interpreting it as it's this piece and the context. So that's a very abstract way of saying, you know, sometimes things aren't always what they seem to be.
I agree with that. So, David, you're known for building a culture where employees feel empowered and valued. That's a great trait and great aspect. You were named, as I mentioned, one of the most admired CEOs by San Francisco Business Time, and that's a big accomplishment. So how would you describe your leadership style, and more importantly, how would your team describe your leadership style?
Well,
I've got a couple in the audience. I can ask them.
I know. I'm looking to see where they are. You know, I think I would describe my leadership style as very demanding. You know, I push myself hard and I push my people hard. I try to give them the tools they need to do their job. And ultimately, I give them a lot of room. You know, I am a detail person. I do like numbers, but I give them the room to go in and do their own job. I try to choose the right people and give them a great amount of freedom to go in and accomplish what they want to accomplish, or what they are supposed to accomplish. At the same time, when that doesn't happen, you know, let's just say justice is generally pretty swift. That, you know, these are important jobs that these people have that work for me, and we're responsible for thousands of people's paychecks. So I take that very seriously. So I would say, I think I'm fair, I think I'm fun to work for, I think I'm challenging, but at the same time, there's a tremendous degree of accountability.
Which I think every CEO has.
How do I do? Anyone in the audience? Okay, thumbs up back there.
We'll ask you after when the cocktails start. David, you mentioned fun, and I think, Virgin America is definitely known for fun, and people have really, you turned the traditional experience of flying and made it more fun. So you've got that viral safety video that has more than 11 million YouTube views. So how does that strategy, you talked about but how do you find yourself having fun with your employees and your team every day?
Well, I think the thing that we focus most on is getting the right personalities in the door. You can't take an unhappy person and make them happy. You can't take an unsatisfied person and make them satisfied. And we look for people who are positive, happy people that are outgoing, and just, again, look for the right personality is the first thing. Then once we get in, we created a culture where it's a very nurturing culture. And that's what we talk about from the day they get in the door and throughout their career, is that their two jobs are to take care of our guests and to take care of each other. And that's all of our jobs in the company. And I think they sense that there is a very supportive culture there, not only hopefully from the top and from my colleagues, but also from each other. And then we do things that are fun. We celebrate wins. We like to have really big, cool parties, and we like to have nice events that Richard comes to and others come to. We make sure that we have a good mix of teammates that get invited to that through lottery. So we make sure that in addition to just having a supportive work environment, that they get to do some things that perhaps they wouldn't be able to do if they worked at other companies.
That's great. So if you could name, again, we have top 3 things here quite a bit, but you can give me 1 to 3. But what do you think are the things you've accomplished at Virgin America that you're most proud of in terms of setting up the organization for long-term success that's going to be, really success of Virgin America long after you're gone?
Okay, I'm going to jump into company jargon here, and I'm going to have to describe what this is. I would say the thing that I hope lasts for long after I go, and I think it will, is what we call Culture Club. And what Culture Club is kind of a abstract term to describe everything about what working for Virgin America means, whether it's how we treat each other, whether it's how we treat our guests or anything else. And we came to the name Culture Club, and actually each of these have a logo, and this one's got a red sketching of Richard's head as its logo. And we came to Culture Club very simply because it was a culture element, but the other part we thought was cool was the fact that that Boy George and who sang with Culture Club was discovered by Richard Branson. And
I didn't know that.
That's actually how we paid the bills very early on, was signing Culture Club to Virgin Records. So that was kind of fun. The second one is what we call Swifty. And what Swifty is the icon is a rabbit. And it's one of those rabbits that you see at a dog racing place. Anyone ever been to the dog races here? This may be more for you and me. But basically what Swifty is it's a mechanical rabbit that goes around the interior of the track that all of the dogs chase. And the whole thing about Swifty is it doesn't matter how fast it is, it just has to be 1 or 2 steps faster than the dog. And that's what we were talking about in terms of our product, is that we always want to make sure we're 1 or 2 steps ahead of where the rest of the dogs, well, our competitors, were. And so I think that has truly been ingrained in our company also. And we have a certain amount of paranoia about the fact that these other guys are big, they've got a lot of capital that they can deploy at it, and how do we make sure that our small little airline stays ahead of them? I would say those are the two big things. And one thing that's more recent is, after you go through, and especially a lot of you are founders and have run young startups, after you go through 5 or 6 years of wondering how you're going to make the next payroll and how you're going to get by this year and next year, to finally have a financially sound company with a strong balance sheet and a good P&L feels pretty good too.
That's great. Which brings me to the next question that you probably get asked, most CEOs and entrepreneurs get asked this, usually by investors, but what does keep you up at night, David?
You know, I would say for most of my years in the airline business, it's been kind of the basic economics, and really around external shocks. You know, we can handle the day-to-day business. The industry can. We can handle economic up cycles and down cycles. But external shocks, whether it's in the form of a commodities bubble, whether it's in the form of, of course, a terrorist act or health or anything like that, those are the things that are somewhat black swan events for our industry. These things used to pop up every 5 years or so. You would have to deal with them, and they could wipe out years of good work. So I would say those are the things that used to concern me. I think the industry is much more stable now. I think in many ways the energy markets certainly are very favorable. So that's less of my concern. And now more of my concern is really what we should be worried about, which is how do we make our company better? And again, it gets back to Swifty. How do we make sure that the other guys who are investing all of this money don't catch up to us, and all of a sudden we wake up one day and we find out that they've all passed us and our key strategic advantage has eroded. So I would say that's the thing I think about more than anything.
Which that's a natural. I mean, we've got a lot of great entrepreneurs in the room, and in what ways do you know, Virgin America has been very entrepreneurial. Everybody can say it's just definitely changed the game of the way people fly. So, but how do you find every day challenge yourself to think as an entrepreneur, and how do you make sure that you're constantly motivating your team to think as an entrepreneur? Well,
you know, I would say the biggest thing is that while we've been successful financially and while we are financially secure, we are still under-resourced compared to the rest of the industry. You know, most of our competitors are 20 times our size. And that forces you to stay in the entrepreneurial mode and forces you to continue to be in the cost control mode, and everything that you do when you're running a startup or when you're a founder, you know, around survival and around just making sure that you can keep this thing alive long enough and healthy long enough to where when it finally takes, it's in good shape and can be brought to the next level. You know, we're still kind of there, even though, again, we've got a very strong balance sheet and we're making lots of money. The scale issue is still a huge issue for us. And so we remind ourselves every day that, yes, we've done a great job, but, you know, the other guys are 15 times larger than us in a business where scale is important. The only thing we have to fight that is kind of the entrepreneurial spirit and thinking like the small guy and taking advantage of being small.
Great. You mentioned Richard Branson a couple times. So how do you deal with, you know, having such a visionary and larger-than-life entrepreneur, part of Virgin America, and how does that influence the company in both the good and bad ways?
Well, no bad ways, of course. You know, it impacts us in quite a few ways. You know, some of the most basic, of course, is people are attracted to work for the company because of what it represents and because of what Richard represents. So that's a good thing, is it brings talent to the company, as well as obviously a tremendously impactful brand. So, you know, those are very positive things. But he also opens a lot of doors for us, you know, that whether it's a partnership, whether it's, you know, the government or even a customer, you know, that he is more than willing to get involved and open doors for us. And, you know, he's also tremendously important when it comes to PR and things like that. You know, on a more subtle level, he's got his fingers in a lot of businesses. You know, he's got roughly 250 businesses all over the world, and, you know, his interests kind of drift from business to business depending on where his mind is and what's going on in the world. But he's always watching what we're doing, and when he thinks we're stepping out of line, he tells us when we're stepping out of line, and he's always pushing us to think bigger and to think beyond, you know, the art of the possible, and maybe to, for lack of a better term, the art of the impossible. Figure out what's impossible and maybe just take one step back from that. So I think that's always his challenge to us also, which, you know, is inspirational to us and also drives us to achieve other things.
That's great. Appreciate that. This one I think you probably get asked a lot, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's the best advice you've ever received and why?
Okay, this doesn't sound like much, but it set off a chain of events that went for about 20 years, so I guess it is somewhat important. I was interested in a job, this is when I was at American Airlines, and I was interested in a job that was a director of finance in London that ran Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I was woefully unqualified for it. I'd only been at the airline for about a year and a half, and the people that were interviewing for it had been there 10 years and were friends of mine and extremely qualified. And I was just kind of bitching about it one day that, damn, I wish that job would have come open a year from now. Maybe I'd have a shot at it. And someone who was an executive at American heard me and said, "You've got a shot at it now. You know, I will get you an interview if you want it." And so that was in the morning. That afternoon, he told me I had an interview, but I had to get on a plane that afternoon and fly to Frankfurt. And of course, back then you wore suits to work. Old habits die hard, I guess. And so I went 2 hours later, got on a flight to Frankfurt. I had, no bag, no nothing. And I was going over to interview with this guy, and I ended up getting the job. And part of it was because I got on a flight to Frankfurt with 2 hours notice. And so I think that was a very small thing that nudged me in a direction, but then kind of set off, I would say, a number of other events. So it was, I'm glad that I was bitching that morning.
You were bitching, and somebody heard you.
Yes.
More importantly, somebody heard you.
Hey, if I'm bitching, they're hearing me.
So the advice. So conversely, what's the worst advice you've ever received?
Wow. Lots of things in college. But they're all a little fuzzy for some reason. I don't know, I think that's tough to answer very simply because I think if I've taken someone's bad advice, that's been one little ingredient and a number of other data points that I made a decision. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I've ever received any bad advice because I've probably discarded it or I've assimilated it as being my own fault because it was just kind of one of the things that I heard, but ultimately I made a bad decision. So I know that's a Weasley answer, but it's my Weasley answer.
Sounds good. So we're going to open the questions up in a few minutes. There's a mic here in the middle of the room, so you guys get your questions ready for David. He's agreed to take questions tonight. I would ask you a couple more questions before we turn it over to the audience. What matters to you most, David?
Wow, that's the if you were a tree question.
We had to get there at some point. Come on.
I don't know. I think, again, it's a little bit hard to describe, but I think, and it's kind of a circular answer too. It's knowing who you are and being that person. That I think my sister-in-law's father, who was a war hero in Vietnam, he always used to say, "Remember who you are." And his point was, remember who you are, not what you are, who you are. So what you stand for and what's important to you. And whenever you're in times of pressure and strife, that's really one of the things that I go back to is who am I and what do I stand for? And so I guess that's a little bit of a circular answer, but it basically means what's important to me is what's important to me.
No, it's great. That's a great answer. When did you always know that, or did you just realize that as you got older?
I think I kind of realized it all along. That there's certain things that I just I've never been one to take the easy way out. I like a challenge, and I like it. I like it when the stakes are high, and I like it when the pressure's high. And I think that kind of allows you, if you like pressure and you like sticky situations, it kind of allows you to stick with your guns and stick with what's important to you.
So, along those lines, what are you willing to sacrifice?
Well, I guess it's the same thing. It's sacrifice the kind of core values and to sacrifice who I am. That's
good. So I'm going to send you back some more familiar questions. Which I know you'd love to talk about, is kind of what are the exciting things that we can see on the horizon for Virgin America in 2016?
Well, we're going to continue to grow the airline. We just started service into Hawaii, which is quite a technical achievement. That you've got to go through a lot of hoops with the FAA in order to get certified to fly that distance over water. And being such a small airline and doing that with completely passing grades, that was a huge accomplishment for us. And now it allows us to go in and build a Hawaii franchise, which I think we'll see more of in 2016, even though we just started it a couple of months ago. The other thing is our in-flight entertainment system, which is a very good system, the best system in the air still. We've got a new version of it coming up. As a matter of fact, we're retrofitting airplanes now with new screens and a new in-flight entertainment system that I think is going to blow people away once we get it up and working the way we want. And I think those will be really the noticeable things. And then, of course, flying to Denver is going to be pretty awesome also.
Okay. I think you asked this question for me a little while ago, but I'm asking in front of the audience. What is the one question you'd ask an entrepreneur that you admire, and who is that entrepreneur?
Well, what I'm fascinated with right now is companies that kind of transform themselves on the fly. So I think we saw it, long ago with Apple when they transformed themselves, especially once the iPhone came out. I think we're seeing it now, at least some people are saying we're seeing it with Amazon with their cloud computing capabilities, and the fact that some people are saying that will have a greater market cap than the core business at some point. But the one I think is the most interesting is what Reed Hastings has done at Netflix. You think back 15 years ago, it was all about DVDs in a box. And you think about the tremendous risk they took to go in and split the streaming business and the DVD business when streaming wasn't necessarily ready to go yet. And the fact that they've gone in and have just created this massive business where there wasn't one before, that was kind of born out of something that was somewhat related but not fully related. And then you go to where they appear to be going now, which is a content provider, original content provider also. So I don't know if there's a question anywhere in there, but I'm really interested in knowing whether these guys had a plan or whether it just kind of started evolving that way and they saw an opportunity.
Right.
Do you have a plan out of the chute that I'm going to change this company, or are you watching what's going on and identify an opportunity and exploit it?
What I love about your answer is you named Apple, Amazon, Netflix, all Nasdaq companies, so that was great.
Yes.